The wind hits differently when there's no one waiting at the window. I used to think that was just a poetic notion, something people said in novels or over a second glass of wine. But it's real. It's hollow. That hush you don't notice until it's everywhere. That's what I live with now. A silence that's not absence. It's rejection wearing perfume. My name is Clara Whitmore. I'm 57. I've been divorced for nearly a decade, live alone in a white clapboard house in a small Midwestern town you'd miss if you blinked. There's a garden out back that I tend to less and less these days. The roses haven't bloomed right in years. 3 years. That's how long it's been since I heard my daughter's voice. Not since she left college. Not since she married that man. I haven't spoken to her since the day she walked out of my life, like I was just a chapter she finished reading. It wasn't always like this. Once she was everything. Aubrey was my light. I raised her alone after her father left when she was 6. He'd call sometimes, from wherever he landed next, full of excuses, but she never cried for him. She only ever cried for scraped knees or lost science projects, and I was always there with a bandage or a backup. I worked double shifts most of her childhood, nursing homes, hotel laundries, late-night cashiering. I was the woman who never sat still. Every extra dollar I earned, every sleepless night was tucked away for her future. Her college fund wasn't much, but it was sacred. I cashed out my life insurance and took out a second mortgage when the tuition came due. I wanted her to have what I never did: options, a clean slate, a chance to belong somewhere better than where we were. She was brilliant. She was going to change the world. That's what her high school counselor said at graduation. Aubrey wore a white dress that day. Not the expensive one we couldn't afford, but one we found on clearance and altered with a needle and thread at midnight. Her hair was pulled back, face glowing with that youthful kind of ambition that makes you ache to look at. And when she hugged me, she whispered in my ear, "I'll never leave you behind, Mom." I promise the camera shutter caught us mid-smile. That photo sits on my mantle. She's still 17 in it, frozen in a moment where love felt simple. But people change. Or maybe they just reveal themselves. She left for college out of state, some big university I still can't pronounce correctly, and the calls were regular at first. Weekly check-ins, shared stories about classes, roommates, laundry disasters. Then they slowed. A missed Sunday here, a hurried voicemail there. "Sorry, Mom, things are crazy. I'll call tomorrow." Tomorrow became next week, then nothing. I remember the exact moment I felt the shift. It wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors. Just quiet. Her voice was softer, less familiar, like she was rehearsing lines in someone else's play. I thought maybe it was stress. I told myself she'd come back around. Then one day, I saw a photo online. Aubrey, in a white gown, not the one from high school this time, a real wedding dress, standing beside a man I'd never met. Nathan Hale. Handsome, polished. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She didn't tell me. No invitation, no call, just a caption. "Forever starts today." I closed the laptop so hard it cracked the screen. I left voicemails. I sent letters, birthday cards, Christmas presents. Once, I mailed her a charm bracelet. Each charm was something from her childhood. A small book, a rose, a little angel. It came back unopened. I kept that box. It's upstairs beneath a blanket in a cedar chest, next to her baby shoes and the tiny hospital bracelet that still smells faintly of talcum powder. Sometimes I sit on the couch and scroll through old photos. Prom night, her first day of school. That trip to the zoo where she fed a giraffe and screamed with joy. And I wonder, where did I go wrong? Was I too strict? Not strict enough? Was my love smothering? Or was it not enough to compete with the world she found without me? The hardest part isn't the silence. It's what fills it. The doubts, the memories that twist themselves into regrets, the sound of her laugh in my dreams that turns into a scream when I wake up. My friend Irene says some children just outgrow their parents, that it's a new generation, that they value freedom more than roots. But I don't think that's it. Aubrey didn't outgrow me. She cut me out like I was a tumor. Necessary for survival, maybe, but toxic all the same. The mailbox is still checked daily, even though I know better. Her name's still on the address label. Habit is a kind of grief, too. There's a voicemail on my phone I've never deleted. It's not special, just her telling me she got an A on her physics midterm. But she laughs at the end. That laugh that used to make everything worth it. It's been 3 years. She didn't come back when I had surgery. She didn't call when her father died. She didn't send a card when I lost the house and had to move into this smaller place. Silence doesn't have to be loud to be violent. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever walk through my door again, if I'll ever see her face in person. Not a filtered photo, not a frozen memory, but real. But mostly, I've stopped wondering. You have to eventually. You learn to live around the hole, to talk to the quiet like it's a roommate, to make dinner for one and not feel pathetic. Still, I light a candle for her every Sunday. I don't pray anymore, but I light that candle anyway. Because something in me refuses to believe this is the end of our story. But if it is, if that chapter really closed without me, then this silence, this space between us, it's not just hers. It's mine now too. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only power I still have left. When people say history repeats itself, they're usually talking about wars and economies. They don't often mean mothers and daughters. But I've lived long enough to know the most unshakable legacies don't come from headlines. They come from the way we're raised to love, or not love, ourselves and the people who claim to love us. My mother, Evelyn, was not a woman of soft hands or soft words. She believed in order, in discipline, in withholding affection like it was a reward you earned instead of a birthright. I learned early how to interpret the small mercies. A nod instead of a sigh. A casserole placed on the table without being asked. Her form of love was a checklist. Clean house, ironed clothes, no back talk. But never once did I hear her say, "I'm proud of you," even when I earned top marks or stayed quiet during my father's tirades. So I vowed to do better. I swore to myself that if I ever had a daughter, she would never have to earn my love. It would be unconditional, loud, abundant. I'd be the mother who cheered too loudly at soccer games, who cried at spelling bees, the one who hugged too long, called too often. I was going to break the cycle, but cycles don't break easily. They bend first, then they recoil. When Aubrey was little, she'd cling to me like a vine. We were each other's world, but I didn't see it back then. The way I mistook control for care. I hovered, disguised my fear as involvement. I micromanaged her schedules, her friendships, even her snacks. I wanted to protect her from everything: disappointment, pain, the bitterness I grew up swallowing every day. She never fought back, at least not at first. She obeyed like a soldier. She got straight A's, made honor roll, never missed curfew. But there were signs, quiet rebellions, books I didn't recognize hidden under her mattress, a growing stack of journals I wasn't allowed to read. Her smiles stopped reaching her eyes sometime around her junior year of high school. I told myself it was adolescence, that every mother loses her daughter for a while. But Aubrey wasn't reckless. She was strategic. She didn't rebel in loud ways. No tattoos, no drugs, no screaming matches. She pulled away the way someone tiptoes through a minefield. Slowly, deliberately, leaving as little evidence as possible. When she got her acceptance letter to Weston University, I remember the way she cried. Not from joy, but from relief. She hugged me, and I didn't realize then that it was a goodbye in disguise. "Mom," she said, "this is everything we worked for." We, as if we were still a team. I was proud, I was terrified, and I was broke. But none of that mattered. I made it work. I picked up extra shifts, stopped eating lunch out, sold my wedding ring. The tuition bills were like small heart attacks, but I paid every one of them on time. At first, things were okay. She called on Sundays. She sent pictures of her dorm room, her friends, the campus in autumn light. But something changed by her sophomore year. The updates got shorter. The calls turned into texts. Then even those became rare. She'd say she was busy, exams, clubs, internships. I believed her because I wanted to. But I started hearing a name pop up: Nathan Hale. First, it was casual. My lab partner Nathan said something funny today. Then it became, Nathan took me to a jazz bar, or Nathan's parents invited me to dinner. The mentions were too frequent, too polished. I asked about him directly once. "He's just a friend, Mom." "Friends don't call you at midnight, sweetheart." There was a pause on the line, one of those silences that hangs like smoke. "You wouldn't understand," she said finally. "He's different." The way she said it made my skin crawl. I did my research. Old habits die hard. Nathan was 2 years older, in a pre-law program, smart, clean-cut, the kind of boy you're supposed to be proud your daughter dates. But there was something in his eyes, even in photos, that unsettled me. Charm layered over calculation. When I met him briefly during Parents' Weekend, he was courteous, too courteous. He shook my hand too long, complimented my dress too pointedly. And when Aubrey looked at him, she wasn't glowing. She was alert, like someone watching for cues. After he walked away to grab drinks, I whispered, "Is everything okay with him?" She stiffened. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Try to make me second-guess myself. Just because he's confident doesn't mean he's dangerous." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." We didn't speak for most of the rest of that visit. Looking back, I think she needed me to approve of him. If only so she could defy me. That was always our dance. My concern became her challenge. My silence, her rebellion. Aubrey graduated a semester early. She told me over email, not a phone call, not a visit home. She said she was starting a job in the city, that she'd be moving in with a roommate. No details. Just a short, efficient message with none of the warmth we used to trade. I asked when I could visit. She said she was still getting settled. Then, nothing. For months. Until one night I got a text from Irene, a screenshot from a mutual friend's social media. There they were, Aubrey and Nathan, in front of a courthouse, rings on their fingers. "Just married," the caption read. "Couldn't wait another day." I dropped my phone. I called her, straight to voicemail. I called again, and again. I sent a message. "Aubrey, please call me. I saw the photo. I just want to hear from you." No reply. She got married, my daughter got married, and I wasn't even worth a courtesy call. For a while, I tried to tell myself she'd explain. That maybe it was sudden. Maybe they'd eloped on a whim. Maybe it was romantic. But deep down, I knew. This was deliberate. A line in the sand. She had chosen him, and unchosen me. That night, I sat on the kitchen floor for 3 hours. I stared at the fridge where her drawings used to hang. I traced the edges of the last letter she sent me from college, a thank you note for a care package. I memorized her handwriting again because it already felt like a stranger's. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out, just like it never did when I was a girl sitting at my mother's dinner table, biting my tongue, folding myself small. So maybe I hadn't broken the cycle after all. Maybe I just passed it down. There's something uniquely cruel about being erased by your own child. It isn't like grief. Not the clean wound of death where people bring casseroles and say all the wrong things, but at least they say something. No, this was slower, invisible, like watching someone quietly back out of a room and never return. After the wedding photo surfaced, I waited. I convinced myself there would be an explanation, an apology, maybe even a visit. But days turned to weeks, weeks into months. The phone stayed silent. My inbox stayed empty. The silence, once confusing, hardened into a verdict. She was gone. Aubrey didn't just distance herself, she disappeared. No social media updates, no shared photos, not even from mutual friends. Her digital footprint vanished like someone had scrubbed it clean. Nathan's pages were private. His name barely turned up anything but articles from his undergrad years. It was as if they'd buried themselves in a curated silence, curated by him. Because by then, I understood. This wasn't just Aubrey choosing a new life. This was someone making her choose. Nathan had always had that edge of possessiveness. I'd seen it in the way he placed his hand on her back when she talked, in how he answered questions meant for her. At the time, I thought I was being paranoid. Now, I saw it clearly. His confidence wasn't charm. It was control, dressed up in smiles. The realization didn't bring relief. It brought helplessness. Because if she was under his influence and I wasn't in her life, who was left to pull her back? I still sent things, birthdays, holidays. A scarf I knitted in winter, a first edition book I found at a garage sale, one she used to read as a child. A framed photo of the two of us from her 10th birthday, faces sticky with cake and joy. None of it came back returned to sender, but none of it earned a reply either. I imagined her opening the packages, rolling her eyes. Or maybe she didn't open them at all. Maybe Nathan opened them, mocked them, tossed them into the trash while she watched, frozen. But the worst part wasn't not knowing. The worst part was knowing that whatever I did, it wouldn't change anything. That's when Irene stepped in. She and I met through the church thrift shop. She was retired, widowed, sharp-tongued in the way women earn after surviving enough heartache to stop apologizing for their opinions. She'd known about Aubrey, Everyone had. "You have to stop torturing yourself," she said one day while sorting donated winter coats. "That girl made her choice. You can't bleed every time she walks away." "I don't bleed," I replied, folding a child's jacket in half. "Not anymore." "That's worse," she muttered, moving on to the next item. "You're going numb." She wasn't wrong. The pain used to come in waves. Now it came in shadows. Quiet thoughts that brushed against me while I was washing dishes or trimming hedges. Regret disguised as routine. The world didn't pause because I was hurting. And eventually, neither did I. I filled my time. That's what people like me do. We survive by staying busy. I joined a community reading group, volunteered at a shelter, started gardening again. I dug until my hands ached, planted until my back gave out. The garden became a reflection of my insides, cluttered, unpredictable. Some things thriving while others wilted before they had the chance. There was one rose bush that refused to bloom. No matter what I tried, new soil, fertilizer, extra watering, it stayed barren. Its branches grew dry and brittle, leaves curling at the edges like burned paper. "Pull it out," Irene said one afternoon, standing with a spade in her hand. "It's wasting space." "I'm not ready," I said. "For what?" "To let it go." We weren't talking about roses anymore, so I left it. Right there by the fence. A monument to what used to be alive. The neighbors probably thought I was odd. I became the woman who kept to herself, who trimmed hedges with precision and walked her mail back inside with a glance no one could meet. I started baking again, but never ate what I made. The pies and cookies went to shelters or Irene or sat untouched until I threw them out. I smiled when people asked about Aubrey. "She's doing well," I'd say, busy with work. Lies, dressed in polite packaging. Inside, I was calcifying. The woman who once cried at Christmas movies couldn't remember the last time she felt anything other than dull ache. The house got cleaner. My conversations shorter. I was conserving energy without realizing it, saving it for a moment I couldn't name. Every now and then I'd have dreams. Vivid ones where Aubrey came home, hair longer, eyes softer. She'd sit on the edge of my bed and say, "I missed you." I'd reach for her hand and feel the warmth of it, like it was real. But I always woke before she finished the sentence. One morning, I opened the front door and saw a package on the steps. My heart jolted. I picked it up, no return address. Inside was a small lavender candle and a card that said, "Peace." That was it. No name, no handwriting I recognized. Just a candle and a single word. I lit it anyway. Let it burn on the windowsill until the wax melted into silence. Maybe it wasn't from her. Maybe it was some clerical error. Or maybe in some small, fragmented way, she was still out there thinking of me. But I didn't chase the thought. I let it drift like smoke. I'd spent enough years haunting my own memories. And yet, every time I passed that dead rose bush, I couldn't bring myself to cut it down. Because some things don't need to bloom to remind you they once mattered. It came on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday where the sky was neither bright nor gray. The kind that passes without distinction. I had just come in from trimming the hedges when I heard it. My phone buzzing against the countertop. A number I didn't recognize. No voicemail alert yet, just a missed call. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the screen like it was a stranger. Then came the voicemail icon. I hesitated. My fingers hovered, then dropped. I pressed play. "Mom." The word hit like a punch. Unpracticed, fragile. "Mom, I don't know who else to call." Her voice was strained, frayed at the edges. She sounded breathless, like she'd been running or crying or both. "I'm sorry. I need you. Please." There was static, a gasp. Then the line cut out. I stood in my kitchen, rooted to the floor. The room felt suddenly foreign. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. My hands, still wet from gardening, trembled. Aubrey. I hadn't heard her voice in over 3 years. And now suddenly it filled the room like incense, something too sacred to touch, too haunting to ignore. I pressed replay. Then again. The 4th time, I leaned against the counter, eyes closed, letting the syllables soak into the marrow. "Mom, I need you." I tried to speak aloud, tried to say, "I'm here." But my throat closed. No sound came out. In that moment, I wasn't 57. I was 35 again, standing in the ER while doctors stitched a gash on 6-year-old Aubrey's chin after a fall at the park. I remembered her eyes, glassy with tears, trust, and pain, all aimed at me. That same voice had once whispered, "Don't let go." And now it was whispering again, just differently. I didn't call back. Not that day. Not the next. I couldn't. It wasn't just stubbornness. It was something deeper, colder. Like all the years of silence had calcified in my chest. Like answering her plea would make me complicit in forgetting what she did. And I wasn't ready to forget. The pain rose in layers. First there was concern. Was she safe? Was she alone? Then came the guilt. Gut level, sickening, maternal. And then, like a slow burn, came anger. Why now? Why after all this time? I needed to talk to someone. Anyone who wouldn't judge the knot of emotions I didn't have a name for. So I called Irene. She picked up on the first ring. "You sound like you've seen a ghost." "I did," I said, sinking into the armchair in my living room. And then I told her. The voicemail. The voice. The request. When I finished, there was a long pause on her end. "Well," she said slowly, "she finally reached for you. She only reaches when she's falling. She's your daughter. She's also the one who left. Those two things don't cancel each other out." I looked out the window. The dead rosebush stood tall and brittle in the garden. "I don't know what to do, Irene." "You already know. You just don't like the options." I sighed. Part of me wants to run to her, wrap her in my arms, fix everything. And the other part wants to let her know what it feels like to scream into a void. Irene didn't respond immediately. Then she said, "You have a right to both those feelings. But remember, power without compassion can rot you from the inside." I hung up not long after. Her words clung to me, not as comfort, but as a challenge. That night I played the voicemail again, and again, trying to find hidden meaning. Did she sound scared? Bruised? Was there someone in the background? Nothing but static. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone, imagining her life. Was she in a hospital? A motel? Her car? Was Nathan there? I hadn't thought of him in months. But now his name echoed in my head with menace. The next morning, Irene called me first. "Are you sitting down?" "I'm always sitting these days." She didn't laugh. "I checked something. I shouldn't have, but I did." "What?" "Local police blotter online. I look through them sometimes. Morbid habit." I sat straighter. "Irene. His name was there. Nathan Hale." The world stopped. "What for?" "Domestic disturbance. A neighbor called it in. Report said a woman refused to press charges. No names, but the address was listed. It's them. Clara, it's Aubrey." My breath caught. I hadn't cried in years. But something inside me cracked. She was in danger, and she had called me. I stood suddenly unsteady. The room spun. I clutched the edge of the table. "Do you think—" I swallowed. "Do you think he hurt her?" "I think she finally realized she needs saving." I hung up without saying goodbye. I went outside. The morning sun was cold. The grass was damp with dew. I walked to the garden, to that rosebush, still lifeless, still stubborn, and stared at it for a long time. And for the first time since she left, I knelt beside it. I touched the branches, dry, brittle, a snap away from dust. But beneath, buried under hardened soil, there were roots, still intact. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. I still hadn't called her back. I couldn't. Not yet, but something shifted. I wasn't just her mother anymore. I was a woman with a choice, and that I hadn't felt in years. The day after Irene called, I found myself back at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd listened to Aubrey's voicemail. But this time, I wasn't just listening. I was digging. It's unsettling how easy it is to look into someone's life when you know what to search for. Addresses, legal records, court dockets, all public if you're willing to click enough. It took less than 15 minutes to find it. Hale, Nathan J. Petition for order of protection, filed by spouse. My chest tightened. I clicked. There it was, a restraining order, temporary, pending hearing, filed a month ago. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading. Her name was there, Aubrey Whitmore Hale. Part of me wanted to believe it was a different Aubrey, a coincidence. But there was the birthday, the city, the address, all hers. I sat back in my chair. the kitchen light casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. My hand gripped the mouse so tightly my knuckles ached, so she had reached out. Not just to me, not just with a voicemail. She'd gone to court. She was trying to get away, and she was alone. My mind spiraled. Back to parents' weekend. Nathan shaking my hand with that politician's grip, calling me ma'am like it was a joke. How he stood too close to Aubrey, how his hand never left her back. How she laughed at his jokes but flinched when he touched her arms suddenly. Back to her junior year, when she stopped coming home for Thanksgiving, when she said Nathan's parents were expecting them. Back to the email she sent canceling our planned visit at the last minute, blaming a scheduling issue. I had believed her. I shouldn't have. I remembered one visit vividly. I'd taken a bus into the city to surprise her. She looked stunned at the door, not delighted, not grateful, but startled, like a deer catching headlights. Nathan had been home. He greeted me politely. Too politely. His eyes never left mine. His smile was teeth without warmth. During dinner, Aubrey barely spoke. She pushed peas around her plate while Nathan recounted his summer internship with a smugness that filled the room. At one point, I reached to refill her glass. He did it first. "That's okay, Mom," she said quickly, eyes darting to him. "Nathan's got it." I should have asked her then. Instead, I left early, blamed work. On the way out, I shook Nathan's hand. He held it a beat too long. Leaned in. "She's lucky to have you," he said with a smile that didn't match his voice. What he meant was, she's mine now. And then there was Delilah, Nathan's mother. I met her once, briefly. She was the kind of woman who wore lipstick that never smudged and pearls even at a coffee shop. When I extended a hand, she barely touched it. "Ah, the Clara Whitmore," she said, like I was a rumor. "Your daughter's quite something." "Thank you," I said. She smiled thinly. Nathan always liked a challenge. That stayed with me, like a splinter. Later, I'd learned that Delilah hosted them for holidays, referred to me as the donor parent, and had once told Aubrey, "You'll thank me when you're older, for giving you standards." I hadn't thought about her in years, but now her voice echoed in my head, oil-slicked and patronizing. I sat in that chair for hours, imagining what Aubrey's life had become. A home where doors were locked for silence, not security. A dinner table where compliments were backhanded, where approval had to be earned with obedience. A life lived inside her own shrinking outline. Flash scenes came to me unbidden, her reaching for a cup only to have it yanked away, her flinching at the sound of his footsteps, her apologizing for bruises with stories no one believed. I imagined her walking into court alone, coat buttoned tight, hair pulled back, hoping to look strong while trying not to tremble. And underneath it all, my voice, not speaking, because I hadn't called her back. Because a part of me had wanted her to suffer, just a little, to feel the sharp edge of abandonment, to know what it meant to be ignored. And now she knew. I should have felt guilt. I should have drowned in it. But what I felt was worse. Conflict. Because the silence hadn't just been punishment, it had been power. After all those years of begging, wondering, aching, I had finally been the one who got to choose. And now? Now she was breaking. Now the power felt like poison in my hands. I stared at the restraining order again. The PDF was short, clinical. It didn't describe the bruises or the fear or the late nights spent pretending to be asleep so she wouldn't be touched. It was just words, boxes checked, a name typed in all caps. But I knew what lived between those lines. I pushed back from the table, stood. My keys were on the hook, my coat by the door. I stared at them. I could drive. Now no one would stop me. I could find her, hold her, bring her home. But I didn't move. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the garden. The rose bush was still there, dry and leafless. I touched one branch. It snapped off in my hand. It was nearly midnight when the knock came. The rain had started earlier, a slow whisper against the windows that built into a steady hum. I was in the living room, half asleep with a blanket over my knees, the television murmuring something I wasn't listening to. I didn't expect company. Not at that hour. Not ever, really. I froze. The knock came again, 3 short raps. Urgent, not loud. I stood, the ache in my knees sharper than usual, and walked slowly to the door. I didn't turn on the porch light right away. Some part of me wasn't sure I wanted to see whatever waited outside. But when I opened it, the past walked in. She was thinner, pale, Her cheek was swollen, a fading bruise curling under one eye like a shadow that refused to fade. Her hair was damp, plastered to her face. In one hand, a suitcase. In the other, nothing. "Aubrey," I breathed. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Then, all at once, her legs gave out. The suitcase thudded against the porch. She fell into my arms with the weight of everything she'd been carrying. She sobbed against my shoulder. My hands hovered before settling on her back, unsure if they were still allowed to comfort her. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. I didn't say, "You could have come sooner." I didn't say, "Why didn't you call again?" I just held her, both of us dripping in the threshold, silent but tethered by the ache. I helped her inside, guided her to the couch. She sat stiffly, as if unsure whether she belonged. I fetched a towel, wrapped it around her shoulders. She kept her eyes on the floor. Neither of us spoke for a long while. The television was still on. I muted it. "You're soaked," I said finally. "I walked," she replied, voice hoarse. "From where?" "Bus stop." That told me enough. Wherever she'd come from, it hadn't been safe. I studied her face. Beyond the bruise, there were small things. A tremble in her fingers. A flinch when I reached for the suitcase. Her eyes darted to every window like someone being watched. I wanted to ask 100 questions. But all that came out was, "Are you hungry?" She shook her head. I sat in the chair across from her. She barely met my gaze. "How long can I stay?" she asked. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you're here to stay or just to hide." Her eyes narrowed. "Is that your way of saying no?" "Number. It's my way of saying this house isn't a shelter. It's a home. But I won't be another lifeboat you abandon when the water calms." She looked away. The silence between us was thick with all the years we hadn't spoken. Every unanswered letter, every birthday missed, every word never said. "I didn't mean for things to happen this way," she said softly. "No one does. But they still happen. I was trying to protect something." "What?" "Myself. Him. United States. I don't know anymore." Her voice cracked. She buried her face in her hands. "Nathan hurt you." She didn't respond. I waited. Finally, she nodded. "Did you report it?" "I tried. Then I got scared. He said he'd fix it. That I just needed help, not lawyers." Classic abuser language. She looked up sharply. "Don't call him that." I leaned back. "I'll call him whatever I want in my house." The heat in her glare faded. She sank back into the couch. "I didn't come to fight," she whispered. "Neither did I." We sat in silence. The storm outside softened to a drizzle. She eventually accepted the guest room. I pulled fresh sheets from the closet, placed them gently on the bed without a word. When I turned to leave, she stood in the doorway. "I should have told you," she said. "About what?" She hesitated. Her mouth opened, then closed. "I'll explain in the morning." I nodded. But the morning didn't wait. It came at 4:13 a.m. I woke to the sound of soft footsteps and the creak of a door opening. I walked to the hallway, the floor cool beneath my feet. Aubrey stood there, bathed in the dim light of the nightlight I kept for no one in particular. She wasn't alone. Behind her, partially hidden in the guest room doorway, was a small boy. Pale skin, dark blonde hair, big, cautious eyes. He clutched a worn stuffed elephant to his chest. "Aubrey," I said slowly. "Who is that?" She didn't answer right away. She knelt beside the boy, placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is Caleb," she said. He's 5. My world tilted. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," she added quickly. "I wanted to, so many times, but Nathan, he said it wasn't safe, that you wouldn't approve, that you'd judge me." I stared at her, then at him. He looked at me like I was a stranger in a place he'd only just learned to feel safe in. I knelt slowly. "Hi, Caleb," I said. "I'm Clara." He said nothing, just stared, but he didn't flinch. I looked up at Aubrey. "You kept a grandson from me." I was scared. Of him, of what I became with him. I stood. "We'll talk more later." She nodded, holding Caleb close. And for the first time in 5 years, I closed the door behind all 3 of us. In the soft morning light, Caleb looked like a photograph I'd forgotten I'd taken. He sat at the kitchen table, legs too short for the chair, cereal bowl clutched carefully in both hands. His lashes were thick, just like Aubrey's were at 5. His hair curled slightly at the back, needing a trim. But it was the eyes that undid me, large, watchful, trying too hard not to be in the way. I stood in the doorway, watching him eat in silence, and I remembered mornings just like this with Aubrey, before school, before the world told her who to be. "Do you want more milk?" I asked. He looked up, startled, like he'd forgotten I was real. "Yes, ma'am," he said politely, voice small. "Ma'am, not Grandma, not Nana, not anything that suggested belonging." I nodded and turned to the fridge, but the words stuck with me like splinters. Later that afternoon, I found one of Caleb's drawings on the coffee table. Crayons, rough strokes, the paper slightly torn in one corner. It showed a house with a stick figure in a red dress, Aubrey, I assumed, holding hands with a smaller figure. Caleb. Above them, looming in black crayon, was something else. Too tall. Arms long like ropes. No eyes, just a jagged mouth. I didn't ask him who it was. I didn't need to. That night, while Caleb slept in the guest room, door cracked open, his stuffed elephant under one arm, I found myself sitting at the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. Aubrey knocked once and entered without waiting. She sat beside me, just like she used to when she had nightmares about thunder. We didn't speak at first. Then, quietly, she said, "He told Caleb I was weak." I didn't move. "He said if I couldn't keep a man happy, I couldn't keep a child safe. That the world eats soft women. That I was lucky someone as strong as him put up with me." I closed my eyes. "Every time I thought about leaving," she continued, "he'd tell me Caleb would end up like me, soft, needy, broken." I turned to look at her. She wasn't crying. She was too tired for that. "He convinced me I was the problem, that my feelings were unreasonable, that my memories were exaggerations. If I cried, I was manipulating. If I stayed quiet, I was cold. That's gaslighting," I said. "I know that now." The words hung in the air. When I was 8, I told my mother I didn't like the way my uncle looked at me. She slapped me so hard I bit the inside of my cheek, told me I was dramatic, that men had a way of looking, that I'd better stop imagining trouble or I'd bring it into the house. After that, I stopped speaking unless spoken to. I thought I was breaking that pattern with Aubrey. I thought I was protecting her by shielding her from silence, by filling her world with affection and structure. But somewhere along the line, I began shaping her with fear. Not fear of me, fear of failure, of not being enough. "I thought I raised you to be strong," I whispered. "You did," she replied. "But strength can look like submission when no one teaches you where your voice ends and someone else's begins." I reached out, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. "You should have told me about Caleb," I said. "I was ashamed of myself, of him. I didn't want to bring you into something I wasn't even surviving." "I could have helped." She looked at me, tired and open. "Could you? Back then?" The question stung because it was honest. "No," I admitted. "Probably not." We sat in that raw honesty for a long moment. "He never hit me, you know," she said finally. "Not the way people think." I waited. "It was worse than that. He rationed kindness. He timed how long I could shower. He decided who I could call, monitored how often. He moved my keys without telling me, then asked why I was always so forgetful. When I got upset, he'd say I was overreacting. Then, when I stopped reacting, he said I was cold." She paused. "I used to beg for a fight. Anything loud, anything clear, but it was all quiet, calculated, designed to make me disappear without bruises." "I'm sorry," I said. "Me too." I thought of my own mother again. Evelyn. How she used to tell me crying was a weakness. How she instructed me to always be agreeable, never demand too much, never let a man feel challenged. She called it knowing your place. I grew up believing silence was dignity, and then I passed it on in different packaging. I told Aubrey she could be anything, but modeled a life where I was everything to everyone but myself. "I made mistakes," I confessed. "We both did." I reached for her hand. She let me hold it. "You're safe now," I said. Her fingers curled around mine. "Am I?" "Yes," I said. Then quieter. As long as I'm breathing, yes. Outside, the wind rustled the garden. I thought of the dead rosebush again, how it still stood, refusing to fall, how its roots clung to life beneath the surface. Sometimes survival isn't blooming. Sometimes it's just refusing to be uprooted. I let her stay, but not without terms. We didn't call it a deal. There was no official conversation, no shaking of hands, but the lines were drawn in the space between our silences, in the pauses after the hard truths had been spoken. "You can stay here," I told Aubrey one morning as we stood by the kitchen sink, sunlight spilling across the counter like a spotlight. "But not as a guest." She didn't respond. "I need you to do the work. Therapy, boundaries, accountability." She raised an eyebrow. "Accountability? I'm not your enemy. But I'm not your scapegoat either." She opened her mouth, then closed it, turned toward the window where Caleb played in the yard. His knees were stained green from rolling in the grass, his hands caked with dirt. He was crouched near the dead rose bush, gently sticking dandelions into the dry soil around it. "He doesn't know how broken I am," she said softly. "Then now's the time to start fixing." That night, we argued. It started with something small, me asking if she'd called the therapist I'd recommended. It turned into a torrent. "You want me to get better so you can feel better about yourself," she snapped. "So you can say you fixed what you helped break. I didn't put Nathan's hands on you. No, you just made me think needing anyone was weak. That love was conditional. You weren't there when I needed someone to tell me I was worth more than surviving." Her words were a slap wrapped in truth. I didn't deny it. "You're right," I said quietly. "I wasn't there. I didn't know how to be." The silence that followed was heavier than the fight itself. But slowly, the space between us began to fill with something different. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a shared understanding that pain didn't cancel out love, and love didn't erase responsibility. We started talking in fragments. Late at night after Caleb was asleep, we'd sit on the porch and speak in pieces. "I remember you used to hum when you washed dishes," she said one night. "I used to cry into the sink too," I replied. She didn't flinch. Neither did I. The yard changed, subtly. Caleb claimed it with the innocent arrogance only children possess. He turned over stones, built twig forts, buried toy soldiers like fallen heroes. Every day, he visited the dead rose bush. He spoke to it, whispered things I couldn't hear. One afternoon, he stuck a tiny flag into the ground beside it, made from a popsicle stick and a torn napkin. "You think it'll grow now?" he asked me. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not. But it knows someone's trying." That same week, Nathan tried to reach out. It started with a text, from a number Aubrey didn't recognize. Just a message. "I know where he is." Then a second. "You think you're safe now?" Aubrey didn't tell me right away. I found her sitting on the bathroom floor, pale and shaking, her phone on the edge of the tub, screen lit. "I blocked it," she whispered. I didn't hesitate. The next morning, I made 3 calls, one to Irene for a lawyer recommendation, one to the legal aid office, and one to my bank. I wasn't letting him pull her under again. Not legally, not financially, not emotionally. What I found made my stomach turn. Nathan had drained their joint account. Every penny. Right before she left. He'd rerouted her paychecks to another account, one he controlled. She never noticed. She'd been too busy walking on eggshells to hear the sound of everything crumbling beneath her. "He stole from her," I told Irene over the phone. "Of course he did. It's not enough to break you. They want to leave you with nothing to rebuild from." We filed a motion. We froze what we could. But that wasn't the worst of it. While digging through bank statements, I noticed something off. An unfamiliar lender's name on the mortgage paperwork. Not the original lender who held the title on my old home, the house I'd lost just after Aubrey's graduation. I pulled the file from my storage box. Compared signatures. It was subtle, but the handwriting didn't match. The loop in the Y, the slant of the W in Whitmore, it was all wrong. Aubrey hadn't signed that second mortgage. I called the bank. An hour later, I had confirmation. The signature had been forged by Nathan. The second mortgage, $25,000, had been taken out just before Aubrey's wedding. Paid in full to an account in his name. I sat at the kitchen table, every breath hot with betrayal. "He used me," I said aloud to no one. but I knew the truth. He hadn't just used me. He'd used Aubrey to get to me. The wedding, the silence. It was all leverage. A slow con wearing the mask of charm. I didn't tell Aubrey right away. She was in the yard with Caleb, laughing, really laughing, for the first time since she arrived. I didn't want to snatch it away, but I would tell her, soon. Because this was no longer just about healing. It was about protecting what we had left, what we might still rebuild. And finally, fully, I knew where to draw the line. It started with a flyer. There was a small women's shelter 3 towns over. The Hearth, it was called. Run by volunteers, underfunded, overbooked. Irene brought the pamphlet to the house, slid it across the kitchen table one morning like it was an invitation. They host survivor nights, she said. Support groups, speaking events, might do you some good. I passed it to Aubrey. She hesitated, then tucked it into her purse without a word. A week later, we stood side by side on a modest stage in a makeshift conference room filled with folding chairs and quiet eyes. It smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. I wore my best cardigan. Aubrey wore a thrifted blouse with sleeves that didn't quite hide the fading bruises on her wrists. She spoke first. Her voice shook at the beginning, but settled with each sentence. She didn't name Nathan. She didn't have to. The women in the room knew. They recognized the symptoms, the carefully worded apologies, the spiraling guilt, the numbness mistaken for peace. When she sat down, I stood. My voice didn't shake. Not because I wasn't nervous, but because I'd spent a lifetime holding things in. I knew how to speak when the floor demanded silence. I was a single mother who thought love meant control, I began. That preparing my daughter for the world meant preparing her for disappointment. I gave her structure, safety, but not freedom, not trust. And when she pulled away, I mistook it as betrayal, not independence. I paused. I was wrong, too. The room seemed to exhale. Aubrey's eyes shimmered with quiet grief, but she nodded. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't supposed to be. It was the beginning of accountability. That night, Caleb sat at the kitchen table drawing while Aubrey folded laundry. I joined him, resting my chin on my hand as I watched his crayon move across the page. He drew a house again. This time, 3 stick figures stood outside. One held a watering can over a flower bed. Another held a teddy bear. The third had short hair and a big smile. "That you?" I asked, pointing to the smiling figure. He shook his head. "That's Mommy. She's better now." I glanced at Aubrey. She didn't look up from the towel she was folding. Caleb added a son in the corner. Then after a long pause, he said, "Daddy used to make Mommy cry when I laughed too loud." The room went still. Aubrey looked up. Her eyes met mine. She didn't cry, but I could see the flood rising behind them. "He told me to stop being noisy," Caleb continued. "So I started whispering all the time." "You don't have to whisper anymore," I said gently. He nodded, though his eyes stayed on the paper. Later that night, after he went to bed, I went to the cedar chest in my room. The same one where I kept old photos, baby clothes, and all the letters I wrote Aubrey over the years. Letters I never sent. I pulled out the last one, still sealed. The envelope yellowed slightly with age. I held it for a long time. The words inside didn't matter anymore. They belonged to a woman who had no idea how far the silence would stretch. I walked out back, the letter clutched in one hand and a lighter in the other. Aubrey followed without asking. We stood by the rose bush. Caleb's dandelions had wilted, but he kept replacing them each day with new ones, little bursts of hope that refused to quit. "I wrote this 3 years ago," I said. "I never needed the words," she replied. "Just the person." I struck the lighter. The flame kissed the paper, curling the corners, devouring it whole. We watched it burn in silence, smoke rising like a slow exhale. Aubrey reached into her pocket and pulled out a pair of scissors. "Your turn?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "I've been scared of doing this for years. He used to say long hair made me look softer. More feminine. More obedient." I didn't respond. She took a strand near her shoulder, hesitated for just a second, then cut it. Then another and another. The hair fell in quiet spirals onto the porch. By the time she was done, her hair was shoulder length, choppy, uneven, but hers. She looked different. Not younger, not older, just unhidden. "You look like you again," I said. "I feel like I'm meeting her for the first time." The wind picked up slightly, lifting strands of her cut hair off the wood. They scattered like feathers, carried off into the dark. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon from the tea I'd started earlier. Caleb was asleep. The world felt still, but not stuck. We didn't hug, we didn't cry, but something deep and long-withered had been watered. And somewhere beneath our feet, I swear, I could feel the rosebush beginning to stir. Courthouses are strange places. So much of the world's chaos funneled through walls too clean, lights too bright. The chairs in the waiting area were stiff, bolted to the floor as if preparing for someone to lose their footing. Aubrey sat beside me, fingers laced tightly in her lap, lips pressed into a line. Her hair was still uneven from the cut she'd given herself weeks ago. But her eyes, they had focus now. No more fog, no more scanning for shadows. "Ready?" I asked. She didn't look at me. As I'll ever be. When the courtroom doors opened, it felt like stepping onto a stage we never asked to audition for. Nathan was already there. He wore a gray suit, a crisp blue tie. His hair was immaculate, his expression neutral, even friendly, like he was meeting with a client, not fighting to keep control of a woman and child he'd systematically dismantled. He looked at Aubrey once, briefly, then turned away. The judge was a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed, impatient with delay. The custody and divorce hearing was scheduled for one day. Tight, focused, emotionally volatile. No jury, just truth, evidence, and time running out. Nathan's lawyer went first. Predictable, polished. He painted a portrait of Nathan as misunderstood, firm, not abusive, structured, not controlling, a provider whose tough love had been misinterpreted by a wife with untreated anxiety. I wanted to scream. Instead, I listened. I watched, I waited. Then it was Aubrey's turn. Her voice wavered at first, but steadied as she described her life. The restrictions, the isolation, the gaslighting. She detailed how Nathan monitored her phone, rerouted her paychecks, convinced her she was paranoid. She recounted one night when she'd locked herself in the bathroom for 3 hours because he'd raised a hand. Not to strike, but to silence. The way he stared. The threat behind it. She cried once, just once, when she said Caleb had started whispering in preschool. That he thought being quiet made him invisible, and that invisibility meant safety. Then I was called. I stood, hand raised, swore the oath, sat in the witness box. My palms were dry, but my chest was a thunderstorm. I began slowly. "I'm Clara Whitmore, Aubrey's mother, Caleb's grandmother." I looked at Nathan. He smirked, almost imperceptibly. "I didn't come here to tear anyone down," I said. "But I won't pretend silence is civility." I talked about the early years, how Aubrey changed after meeting Nathan, how her calls diminished, how her light dimmed. I described my visit to their apartment, the unease in Aubrey's posture, the way Nathan spoke for her. I told them about the restraining order, about the bruises, about the night she showed up at my door, soaking wet, suitcase in hand, holding a child who called me ma'am. I mentioned the drawing Caleb made, the black crayon monster. I kept my voice steady, clean, but my words cut. Then came the flashbacks. My mind, even while I spoke, lit with images. Aubrey at age 10, clutching my hand during a storm. Aubrey at 17, whispering, "I'll never leave you behind." The silence of her disappearance. The phone call I almost didn't return. The letter I burned. The hair she cut. The boy who learned to whisper before he learned to trust. I ended with this. "I failed her once by letting her go without fighting. I won't do that again." There was no sound in the room when I stepped down. Then it was Aubrey's final moment. She held a folded paper in both hands. Unfolded it slowly. Her fingers didn't shake. She read, "To the court, I am not here as a victim. I am here as someone who believed for too long that love meant losing yourself slowly. I believed I could be enough if I was smaller, quieter, easier to handle. But shrinking didn't save me. It buried me. My son has a right to a life where love doesn't hurt. And I have a right to exist outside the boundaries of someone else's control. I am not asking for revenge. I am asking for peace, for freedom, for truth." She folded the letter, sat down. The judge didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her words were clipped but deliberate. "The court finds sufficient evidence of psychological and financial abuse. Custody is awarded solely to the petitioner. A permanent restraining order is hereby granted against the respondent. Divorce finalized as of today. We didn't cheer, we didn't cry, but we breathed. Nathan didn't flinch. He whispered something to his lawyer, stood, and walked out as though the floor hadn't just crumbled under him. Outside the courthouse, Irene was waiting with her car. We climbed in without words. Caleb was at home with a neighbor. Aubrey stared out the window the whole ride. Just as we turned down our street, Irene's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, frowned. "What is it?" I asked. She passed it to me. An article. Headline: Hailtech CFO under federal investigation for fraud and financial misconduct. Nathan's company. My breath caught. The article was sparse but damning. Embezzlement, wire fraud, shell accounts. An anonymous tip had triggered a full-scale audit. Charges pending. I turned to Aubrey. She didn't ask what it said. She just looked at me with a kind of exhaustion that was bone deep. "Will he go to prison?" she asked. "Maybe," she nodded. "Then I can finally stop looking over my shoulder." I reached for her hand. We didn't speak the rest of the way home, but the silence this time wasn't absence. It was a beginning. The lake house hadn't seen life in over a decade. Nestled on the edge of Cedar Hollow, it had belonged to my late aunt, passed to me in probate, forgotten during the years I poured everything into tuition, work, and survival. Now it waited, quiet and hollow, boards creaking from disuse and wind-whittled paint peeling off in gentle flakes, like the skin of an old scar. Aubrey and I stepped into it together, flashlights in hand. Caleb trailing behind with a look of suspicion only 5-year-olds could pull off convincingly. "It smells like ghosts," he announced. I smiled. "Smells like cedar and mold, sweetheart. But yes, maybe some friendly ghosts, too." We started small, clearing out cobwebs, airing out the rooms, fixing broken window panes. Irene donated extra paint. A friend from church helped replace old plumbing. Aubrey repainted the kitchen cabinets sky blue. I planted wildflowers along the path to the dock. We moved slowly, but with purpose. Caleb had nightmares at first. Most nights he'd wake with a soft whimper that echoed down the hallway. I'd find him sitting upright in bed, staring at the window. Not crying, just watching, waiting. "What do you see, baby?" I asked once. He shrugged. "I think it's quiet now, but I'm listening in case it comes back." We never asked what it was. We didn't need to. But slowly, his drawings changed. The black monster disappeared. His stick figures smiled. The house he drew had curtains and flower pots. One even had a tire swing. Some mornings I'd find him laughing at cartoons, cereal in hand, feet kicking with joy. Each giggle was its own kind of milestone. I took up journaling again. Part of my therapy, part penance, part peace. I wrote about the rosebush, about my mother's hands, about the sound of silence when it's chosen instead of imposed. Some days the entries were 3 pages, some days just a line. I'm learning to listen without preparing to defend. Aubrey began writing too, but not in a journal. One afternoon, she sat across from me at the dining table, a laptop open, fingers tapping furiously. "What are you working on?" I asked. "A proposal," she said without looking up. "I want to start something, a place, a space for women like me," she said. "Women who didn't leave because they couldn't afford to, or because they were too scared to remember who they were." She clicked a few keys, then turned the screen toward me. Her nonprofit. Still unnamed, still unregistered, but real. Later, she decided to call it Second Light. I watched her breathe life into it the way she used to draw cities as a child, brick by brick, detail by detail, with fierce imagination and quiet determination. She held meetings, wrote grants, held her first circle in our renovated living room. 5 women with stories that made my skin crawl, but their strength made my chest swell. One night after Caleb had gone to bed, we sat outside near the lake. The moon rippled on the surface, and the cicadas filled the space we no longer feared. "I used to hate the quiet," Aubrey said. "So did I. I thought it meant something bad was about to happen. It used to." She reached for my hand. "I love you," she said. I turned to her. I hadn't heard those words from her in years, not without weight behind them, not without the sound of pain tucked into the folds. But this time it was clean, open. "I love you too," I replied, and for once I didn't feel the need to follow it with "but" or "still" or "anyway." We sat there for a long time, no need to fill the silence with anything other than presence. The lake shimmered. Somewhere behind us, wind moved through the trees like a hymn. Later that night, in my journal, I wrote, I ignored her call, but maybe I needed to, so we could rebuild from truth, not illusion. If I had answered out of guilt, I might have tried to fix her instead of hear her, and that's what broke us in the first place. The house still needed work. The roof leaked in 2 places. The floor creaked like an old man's joints, but it was ours. And in it, we were building something better than perfect. We were building honest. We picked a spot by the fence. The ground was softer than I expected, sun-warmed and loosened by spring rain. Caleb stood beside me, small shovel in hand, his face smudged with dirt and determination. The new rose bush sat between us, still in its pot, green and promising. You ready? I asked. He nodded. I want to do it all by myself. You got it. He knelt, stuck the tip of the shovel into the earth and pushed. The soil gave way, 1 scoop at a time. I watched him work. His brow furrowed in concentration, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth like his mother used to when she focused too hard on her coloring books. Think it'll grow fast? He asked. Nothing good grows fast, I said, but it'll be strong, and it'll last. Behind us, the rest of the garden bloomed in quiet, vibrant rebellion. Wildflowers spilled over the stone path. The once dead rosebush, Aubrey's rosebush, was full again, unexpected buds opening like small declarations. It had bloomed weeks ago, soft pink, persistent. Caleb swore it was because he talked to it every day. I didn't argue. I helped him pat the new plant into place, hands firm but gentle. He poured water from a dented tin can, drenching the roots with care. We stood back to admire it. She's going to be real pretty, he said. She already is. The air smelled like life, like grass and pollen, and something almost holy. The wind was gentle, the sky clear. There were no monsters in sight. Inside the house, the walls held stories now. Not just the old ones, the ones we'd carried like luggage, but new ones. Stories of baking mistakes, of Sunday puzzles, of quiet healing. Aubrey laughed again, not often. But when she did, it rang like a bell through the kitchen. She left the bathroom door unlocked now, kept her phone turned on. Her nonprofit, Second Light, had secured its first round of funding. The living room became a workspace. The dining table, a desk covered in flyers, grant proposals, and survivor testimonials. She said thank you more. She said, I'm tired without shame. She didn't whisper apologies when she took up space. And Caleb, he had started sleeping through the night. Some mornings he crawled into bed beside me just before dawn, curling up like a kitten. No nightmares, no flinching, just breath, warm and slow, tucked into my side. I began to write again, not just in my journal, but to other women, survivors, mothers, strangers, letters that started with I believe you and ended with it's not too late. It felt good to give what I never had, because this story was never about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at Nathan or punishing silence or even rewriting the past. It was about rebirth, about what happens when you stop running from the wreckage and start picking up the pieces, even the ones you don't recognize. Resilience isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just getting up every morning, making coffee, saying I love you and meaning it, digging into the dirt and planting something new. Forgiveness didn't come easy. It wasn't linear. Some days I still ached at the old wounds, at the years lost, the birthdays missed. But I no longer mistook pain for purpose. Aubrey forgave in her own way, slowly, out loud, sometimes mid-conversation. You did the best you could, she'd say, or I know you didn't mean to hurt me. Sometimes we forgave each other without words, in the quiet hours, in the shared glances, in the way she refilled my tea before I asked, in the way I waited until she was ready. We rebelled, together, not with fists or fire, but with softness, with honesty, with presence. That night after dinner, I offered to put Caleb to bed. He brushed his teeth in record time and picked out a book, The Giving Tree. He didn't understand it all yet, but he liked the pictures. I tucked him in, pulled the blanket to his chin. He handed me the book and settled in. Halfway through, I looked up. Aubrey stood in the hallway, arms crossed loosely, watching. Her face was soft, unburdened, eyes full of something more powerful than relief. Gratitude. I finished the story, kissed Caleb's forehead. Good night, little sprout. Good night, Grandma Clara. He finally said it, naturally. No one had asked him to. I turned off the lamp and slipped out of the room. Aubrey stepped aside to let me pass. We didn't speak. But our bond, the one we thought we'd broken, felt whole again. Not perfect, not untouched, but real. Tested, tempered, true. I stood at the window for a while before bed. The rose bush was barely visible in the moonlight, but I knew it was there. Thriving. And I thought, maybe this is what family really means. Not who you're born to, but who stays when it hurts. If this story stirred something in you, held a mirror to your silence, or gave voice to your own ghosts, you're not alone. We tell these truths not for closure, but for connection. Keep walking with us, because some stories don't end, they ripple.